Welcome back to another episode of The Inside. Very excited today to have special guest join me, Fred Guttenberg. Fred, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick background story on how we connected. As we said, so we share a mutual connection on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Greg Kahn from IOTC. I see that you and he interact on a regular basis around gun safety. And then I made a comment, wrote a post about safety really coming from the security industry. It's very important to our industry, but having a conversation and narrative around what safety actually means, especially as things continue to move forward, is a continued conversation that we have. And understanding your background and what you've been through, was grateful for you to take the opportunity and the time to come share some of your views and thoughts around safety as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is an important conversation. I think just today, the news about another shooting in Texas at an aquarium. And I'm trying to get businesses, and for sure, to start focusing on this issue of gun violence, because this does now affect you. It does. These things, legislators are passing laws that are potentially making your business less safe. They won't get sued, but if something happens in your business, you will. And so the conversation, that we're having and I'm trying to have with others on this topic matters deeply.
Yeah, 100%. So if you don't mind, for those of you that do not know who you are, and I would tell everyone that they should go read up on who you are and follow some of the information you're putting out. Do you mind just giving a little bit of a little background on where you've come to this point to have this conversation? If you don't mind sharing some of that, that'd be great.
February 14th, 2018, I sent my two children to school. At the time, my son was 16 and my daughter was 14. And it was a perfectly normal day. It was Valentine's Day. The day started like any other day with my kids bickering and running late and me rushing them out the door, not knowing that I was rushing them into the place where my daughter would eventually die. Because that day there was a shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland where my kids went. And my daughter was on the third floor. She was the second to last to be shot. My son heard the bullets that were shooting her, and our family is forever changed. My family has been a part of two national tragedies, because 4 months before the shooting, my brother died of cancer related to his service in 9/11. He ran the triage for the World Trade Center. And I've been blown away how this country took decisive, amazing action after 9/11, and yet is just incapable to date when it comes to another American tragedy, that of gun violence. And so I spend my life now trying to do something about that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can only imagine it's one thing to go through too. So thank you for sharing the background, as hard as that is, and then also the carrying the voice on and finding purpose in it to make an impact. So thank you for doing that. You bring up some good points to the conversation that I think is relevant to at least the security industry, where if you look at all of the value statements of all of our entire industry, it is about keeping people safe in places. That's like what we build our industries. And all of these tragedies that you talk about happen to be in buildings that our industry builds products for, but yet, we can't look past the fact that the purpose of what we're doing to things, of what we build and what we do every single day as someone that works in the security industry, things happen like that happen. So we can't kind of ignore them at all. And it's actually, I think, what drives a lot of people in our industry. But that being said, it is a business. in a lot of cases too. So we make decisions on a regular basis that may not be in the best interest of safety. And I guess, and I picked on one area being that, if you look at the boards of a lot of the public organizations in our industry, most of them are people that are in business and do operations better, or, they help with talent and the rest of that. But I don't know of any, frankly, that, and there may be some that have people that have been impacted by when the safety doesn't happen in our industry. So what would happen if someone like yourself was on there? Would we, I don't know, put priorities that were different in that? I guess, well, I mean, what do you think when a statement like that is made? And then also any advice or thoughts that you have around how companies like ourselves should be looking at safety and make some changes or impacts, or like what we can do?
Boy, what a great and interesting point, because corporations are not structured in a way where they have people like me on their boards. They're not, and they should, because with the changing workplace that we have now, more people working at home, which only enhances the risks of gun violence or other kinds of safety issues, and the increase in gun violence that we see around this country, that's affecting businesses, it's affecting employees, it's affecting customers. And we also see, because in the absence of legislation from Washington, D.C., we see states taking this into their own hands. Some are doing a lot to make people safer, some are going the other direction, and corporations don't have a systematic, unique way across the country to respond. They need to take this seriously, and maybe they ought to put people like me on their boards. Employee safety and consumer safety should be a priority of theirs. You've given me a lot to think about, because there is so much that they can and should be doing, whether it is in terms of having internal corporate policy or using their lobbying dollars as a counterweight to a lobby and an industry that believes the solution to everything is just, let's get more guns out there. There's a lot corporations can do.
Yeah, no, and I would agree. And I mean, to be fair, and in some cases they may think they're doing it. And I guess the point that at least that got me thinking was, we've built an industry for the past 30 to 100 years, depending on how you go back. But if I look at the electronic access controls, it's been the past 30. It was based off of, keeping barriers up and keeping bad people out. Now we have a switch to where we're letting the right people in, and the embracement of technology, and things have changed. But I wonder if we haven't necessarily changed with the times, how they've changed and the needs of what they've had. And I know from being in some of the meetings that not all of these meetings, but in enough of them to know that the impact that the investor community of people putting money into the business and the boards that they have on the actual work that gets done within the companies is monumental. I mean, it drives a lot of what goes on. And then when you look at it, though, it's like, we talk about it from a diversity inclusion side too, but it would also then, from life experience, as you would imagine, would also need to be implemented in order for us to start to see changes happen.
No, listen, you're making complete sense. You're actually going in a direction that I had not considered or thought of. And you had mentioned it to me, I think it was a LinkedIn conversation we had not long ago. But having this dialogue now, it makes too much sense. I mentioned to you before we started the podcast about a shooting. Maybe I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that just happened in Texas. Again, and another business. Now, Texas is a state that's passing laws that will make people less safe. You can now go have guns in Texas, no permit, no training, nothing. Okay. And you're now seeing the consequences of that horrible legislation. They're also telling the business sector, if you create policy to do anything about it, we may ban you from operating in our state. Businesses need to start stepping up and fighting back, because the risk and liability is being pushed off to them. And so I really appreciate this conversation because it is something that we can do. You're right. When businesses take action, they can have real meaningful results, and it's time.
Yeah, and I'm hoping for the one industry, in my opinion, that it's centered around this is and the industry does a lot when it comes to safe schools and places like that, but it definitely could do more in that case. Switch gears and for 1 second on this end, when you talk about businesses doing that, and you may or may not know, but are there any that you can point to that are doing a good job with this currently now? And then the follow up to that too question would be, are you seeing any implementations of technology in schools and places, or even through legislation and things like that? We balance safety and security and cybersecurity with like you're seeing now facial recognition systems being banned in certain places. The rest, like, what is your view? We have like shooter detection systems and gun detection systems, and more barriers and things like that going on. I mean, what are your views on people that are implementing properly or on technology such as that are intended to make things better?
Listen, my first view is all the technology is geared at dealing with the reality of the place we put ourselves in, which is a country that has 400 million weapons on the street. Okay. And because we've not taken the steps necessary to keep gun violence away from us, we are now in a place where we need detection systems, silent panic alarms, which schools are putting in, better camera systems. And so, listen, anything being done to enhance safety of whether it be a school, a shopping area, a place of worship, a hotel, we have no choice. We have to do it. What I don't want to do, though, is assume that's the only solution, because that just normalizes gun violence. And so it is the reality that we live in, but we also have to use technology to identify threats before they happen. We have to use our corporate might to push legislators to pass legislation that will do a better job of keeping these threats as something that we won't have to worry about. So it's multifaceted. I don't just want to focus on the stuff that just normalizes and assumes gun violence is here to stay.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, that's classic sort of, and I find myself going into those areas where I spend a lot of time on technology, so we sort of go to that area. But it's sort of what do they call it? The sort of like solving for the symptom, not the cure, or whatever, like of that, right? Yeah, that's what I find myself. I sound like that guy. No, I appreciate that. Do you mind? I noticed the book behind your shoulder. Can you talk a little bit about your book? What's the story behind it? And then also just let people know where they could find it, because I'd love for them to hear about it.
So the book is Find the Helpers, and it is my story. It's the story that I told you earlier about having been a part of 2 American tragedies. But what happened after Jaime was killed, I never really wrote before. And a few weeks after she was killed, I went on Twitter and I started. Twitter became my voice. It's how I got things off my chest. But when I was planning her funeral, the funeral director also handed me a journal. And he asked me if I've ever journaled before. And I said, I haven't. He said, take this and start. He goes, you'll thank me one day. And he was right, because writing became my therapy. And 4 months after Jaime was killed, I told my wife, I want to write a book. In the process of writing the book, my initial intention was to just tell the story. But as I was writing, it became clear to me, my story, my life isn't possible without all the other amazing people who have been a part of it. Some, famous, political people, some famous entertainers, but also the everyday human beings who have stepped into my life and carried me through good times and bad. And so I wrote this book, Find the Helpers. It is how I found hope. And my hope is for anyone who reads the book that once you see my story, you go through life focusing on who your people are, who your helpers are, who you will rely on. And if you're not sure, then go to a place of worship, go to a community center, Google places where you need support. There's always people around who will be there for you. I also want Americans to know that if you're in a position to be a helper to others, that you should do it, because we are a connected society. We've seen it through COVID. We didn't get through any of that alone. And going forward, we need each other. Find the helpers.
Great story and meaningful, and finding agency and things and people and that. So very, very timely, especially I think, if anything, like you said, through COVID, a lot of us who may not have had a ton of adversity have felt it, at least in their own respects, and are looking for networks, and have maybe grounded themselves to go do that. So no, thank you. All right, well, Fred, thank you very much for, and actually, wait, you can find the book anywhere?
Oh,
Amazon,
it's Amazon, of course. Barnes and Noble,
bookstores,
independent bookstores. There's an independent bookstore in Miami called Books and Books, where they actually have signed copies. I go down there every couple of months and sign a bunch. So any book you order through Books and Books in Miami, they'll send you a signed copy.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that in the show notes, and that so people know. So, well, Fred, thank you. My hope here was to get the voice out a bit more within our industry, to make sure people saw the work that you're doing, and taking an unimaginable tragedy and doing something about it, which I appreciate. We have a good amount of people that interact with us from the young professionals in our industry. So I want to also make sure that they hear the voice, because in my opinion, there are a lot of it that are implementing the change within our industry currently now, and are the leaders, not only just the future leaders, but the leaders today. So giving them guidance and hearing your voice, I think, is very important. So thank you very much for taking the time. I hope this is the beginning of many, many conversations. And if I could be of any help, I would.
Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.